Hello, and welcome to the Extended Disc 30-minute webinar. My name is Christina Bowser, and I'm a senior trainer here at Extended Disc, and I'm here today with my boss, Mark Hugh Kauppinen, President and CEO of Extended Disc North America. Welcome.
Hi, Christina. Good morning.
Yeah, well, this is a lucky one because he has been traveling so much. It's been hard to catch him in the office. So once he's in here, we always try to drag him in here for a 30-minute webinar. So today's topic, again, just so you know, we're going to record it for any of your counterparts or anyone that you know. It will be put on our public website. Today's topic is I'm successful. Why change? So tell us, why did we pick this particular topic?
Well, when we're using extended disc, ultimately what we are talking about is how to modify our behavior. And in that process, we certainly want to start by creating a very confident self-awareness and then thinking about what kind of changes do I need to make, how I behave, how I communicate, how I make decisions, how I lead, how I sell, and so on. And ultimately, I think what we're talking about is getting out of our comfort zone, because our comfort zone is our natural behavioral style, whatever that disc profile you may have is the kind of way you prefer to behave. And unfortunately for many of us, it's too comfortable to kind of autopilot, just repeat the same behaviors. They're most comfortable to us. They take no energy really to execute. And we don't have to think about it. So we get stuck in that comfort zone.
And I think when we're successful or feel we're at a point in our career that we're successful, that becomes even more prominent.
Absolutely, because when we become successful, in some ways we become a little bit lazy. It becomes we lose some of that motivation to modify the behaviors because it takes effort to modify behaviors.
Yeah, changing is a pain.
Yeah, but now to be clear, there certainly are a lot of successful people who continue to not only to make those behavioral modifications, but they work on it and become more and more skillful at it. But for some people, we often see that they begin to lose that motivation to make those changes. So I want to talk about that this morning and hopefully give all of the disc styles something to think about. What can I do to get out of that comfort zone?
Yeah, and I just want to congratulate those that are listening in on this, the fact that you are already successful and you're more open to the fact that you can be better.
That's right. So let's get started. Let's talk about success first. In some ways, success actually can be a trap. Like I mentioned, that we begin to lose the motivation to stop changing behavior and making those adjustments on a continuous basis. And really, the underlying reason for that is that changing behavior is difficult. Even that when we practice it, it does become easier, but we still have to make conscious decisions about how to modify our style. Part of that is to learn to identify the styles of other people. That's a pretty easy skill to learn, but you still have to pay attention to it. Now, more you practice all of these skills, they become more of a muscle memory and almost second nature. But you still, I believe, if you really want to do it well, you have to pay conscious attention to it. And changing behavior, it takes energy. I mean, it takes effort. There's no way around that fact. And greater the adjustment is, more energy is going to take. So when we become more successful, I think it becomes even a little bit bigger challenge, because you kind of start thinking about, hey, why should I change? Why do I need to continue to make those modifications? I'm doing pretty well as it is. So then you fall into this, what my friend Marshall Goldsmith calls the superstition trap. And this is how it works. I'm successful. I behave this way. I must be successful because I behave this way. But a lot of times it doesn't quite work that way, because sometimes, yes, there are some behaviors that I'm successful because of those behaviors. But many of us, me included, we have those in spite of behaviors. I'm doing well in spite of all my behavioral flaws. And if we are not very aware of what those in spite of behaviors and because of behaviors are, and have a clear understanding what the differences are, it's going to get in our way.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because the because of behaviors are probably things that are part of our style. We do it well, but the in spite of behaviors we need to be more consciously aware of. I think another reason why people don't always want to change when they're successful is because they fear change. I mean, they fear that they might mess up what they're doing well already. So,
yeah, fear and denial often get in the way of behavioral change. Any kind of strong emotions, I believe, are really the enemy of behavioral modification.
Yeah.
And I can understand it why this happens for successful people is because you realize that I'm successful, and you begin to think about I must be successful because of who I am. And certainly, no matter what your DISC style is, DISOC, I find very successful people rather come from all of these behavioral style areas. Part of what makes us successful is who we are.
Mm-hmm.
But when we don't have the awareness of when our behavior is actually getting in the way of our success because we are not making behavioral adjustments,
Mm-hmm.
that's really what we're talking about this morning.
Well, so to make adjustments, we kind of have to know where we make adjustments from. You just mentioned about the comfort zones. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, and let's talk about in context of the DISC model. And I'm not going to actually talk about what the different DISC styles are all about, but the kind of interesting thing is that we're talking about getting out of our comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, the starting point is that we need to understand what our comfort zone is.
Exactly.
So, with the DISC model, we are a combination of all of these 4 DISC styles. One of them is the most challenging to us, and one is the most comfortable to us. We need to have a clear understanding of where we fall in this model, because that provides a starting point of who we are. So, if we are, for example, let's say our famous friend here, Sam, who many of you people in the audience have seen before, Sam, whose natural style is the DI, that's the starting point of that arrow. And the arrow indicates how Sam perceived at the time that he needed to modify his behavior in order to be successful at his present work environment. But really for Sam, the starting point is really to understand where his starting point is. Things like describing him as direct and competitive. Those are behaviors that are very natural to him. And in many ways, those behaviors have created his success.
Mm-hmm.
But in order for him to continue to become more successful, continue to improve his performance throughout the day, he really needs to leave that comfort zone. Sometimes it may involve becoming more of I style, sometimes more of a C, and so on. We are moving all around this DISC model, making conscious modifications in our behavior. The longer that Sam's arrow becomes from one interaction to next, more energy that's going to take. And by the way, sometimes it may mean that he needs to be more of a D style. So this kind of shows you visually what Sam is doing throughout the day in order to improve his success. So the starting point is to have a clear understanding what behaviors are most comfortable to me.
So what I hear is, Markku saying we are all 4 styles, but we're going to have a style that is less comfortable to us, one that's more comfortable to us, but throughout the day we need to modify our behaviors to different styles constantly all day long.
That is absolutely correct. And the more we create this confident self-awareness, we can look at it from different angles. We can certainly look in terms of how we communicate or how we make decisions. But then you can also start looking at what it means in terms of my leadership behaviors or my sales behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So we can look at more specifically to make the decisions a little bit more from a big picture to actual very specific decisions about how I need to modify my behavior, let's say in terms of my leadership or my sales behaviors. And it's a kind of a continuous journey, and where we really, we almost like this onion of layers, and we try to understand deeper and deeper, what does my behavioral style, my natural style, mean in practice in different contexts.
So knowing what our style is, but also how do you put it at a practical level for specific roles and settings.
That's right. In order for us to make intelligent, right decisions about how to modify, we need to know where we're modifying from.
And then now you're talking about, making these adjustments and modifying behaviors. Where does a person start?
Well, the starting point is really is what I call awareness and acceptance. And people who have heard me talk about DISC, I always talk about having a self-awareness, but more specifically having a confident self-awareness. And the confident self-awareness, to me, what it means is that I've really taken a very honest look at who I am, and really try to fight the denial part. We tend to deny some of our behavioral traits because certainly me included, we would like to be perfect, but all of us have some strengths, which, we'll talk about those in a moment, but we also have some development areas. But when I think about what I've been doing the past 20 years, really the most rewarding thing for me has been to be able to meet and work with extremely talented people who really have made their life mission and very passionate about helping other people get better. Consultants, coaches, trainers. And when I think about the ones that really stand out and I believe are the most successful ones and really are the most effective ones, when I stop and think about it, a couple of things come to mind. One is that they're not all the same. They come from different parts of the world, very different backgrounds, different educational background experiences throughout their life. So they're very different people. They're also very different in terms of their dish style. There's many D's I know, I's and S and C's who are very successful. But one thing they all have in common, I think they really are very self-aware. And I think if you stop and think about people who you think are successful in life, and I don't care how you define success, but you probably find that those individuals are very genuine individuals. They also they kind of make fun of themselves. They can laugh at themselves. And the reason is that they are confident in their own skin. And they have made a peace with the fact who they are. So they have that acceptance of who they are. And once you have that type of a foundation to make behavioral change, I think then you really are going to be successful.
So you're saying like, and Markku has met many different people in many different realms, but you're saying that people who are successful, not only they're self-aware and they're comfortable, but they know their strengths, but they also know the areas where they're not as strong. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they're very self-aware in those terms. They realize that they have strengths and they're very conscious of making sure they don't overuse their strengths. But they also are very honest about their development areas. They don't fight them. They try to develop their work. A lot of times they bring in other people into their teams that complement their style. So absolutely, and as whatever their roles are, whether they are executive coaches or people who are leaders or people who are very good at selling, I find that the people who are very genuine and that you can see that they almost radiate this self-confidence and it's not arrogant, by the way. It's very endearing almost. It's very easy to communicate with them. It's easy to have a dialogue. And as the leaders, they're very effective because they're real people. And it's not like they're trying to manipulate you or they're not trying to somehow get you to do things that they wouldn't do. Their confidence in their awareness makes them very, very effective.
And would you say that confidence is determined differently even by the styles? Like a D style may be very confident, but it's going to be a different confident self-awareness than.
Well, certainly the D style and our behavioral style, it answers the question how we do things. So it has a significant impact. But people who are comfortable in their own skin, they are able to modify that behavior and also use their style as a kind of a foundational starting point. And then they are able to make those adjustments. And I'll give you some tips what different dish styles could think about in terms of the adjustment in a moment. But they make them very effectively. Yeah. And other people see that as a very genuine behavior, and you can really build strong relationships, and they're effective in communication, they're effective in motivation, and they're just effective. That's the bottom line.
Okay. So good and bad. Is there a good and bad? Can we do things?
Well, we talked about the starting point for this self-awareness is that comfort area is that when people get their, let's say, extended dish results for the first time, they're going to quickly look at the strengths. Yeah, I know that. And sometimes we take those strengths even for granted, but we kind of focus on the development areas, our weaknesses. There's no good or bad in the DISC model. It makes no value judgments about what's good or bad behavior. There's no better or worse, no high or low score. But when people look at the reports, sometimes they put their own value judgments and they say, this is good behavior, this is bad behavior. So no matter what your style is, you need to take a look at what those behaviors are and make peace with that fact, and then begin to make the effort to develop and make behavioral modification. But we are so focused many times, I think we're conditioned to focus on our weaknesses, that our irony is that actually our strengths are the parts of our behavioral style that typically gives us the most trouble, gets into difficulties, because I call it a two effect. So no matter what your style is, your D, I, S, or C, if you think about the attributes that describe your behavioral style, just to add the word two to those behaviors, if you are like Sam, direct and competitive, If you are too direct and too competitive, it's going to hold you back.
Okay. So it's almost like exhibiting the negative aspects of our style.
Yeah, so you need to have a strong awareness that when we are being too much of ourselves, that can really hold us back. Because ultimately, only thing we can do is control our own behavior. I can't control what other people are going to do. We try to do that with our spouses, significant others, try to change their annoying behaviors. It's not going to happen. So the only thing we can do is what we're going to do.
Still trying.
Good luck with that.
So, we talk about what happens when we're successful as we move along in our careers. We get into situations that cause us to overuse our style or put us into pressure situations. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, certainly all of us have pressures. We feel stress and frustrations and other emotions. And when we think about awareness and acceptance, it's important for us to also be aware of what happens when we are feeling those kind of emotions. Strong emotions are basically an enemy of behavioral modifications. So having clear understanding how my style comes across when I'm under pressure is important. So for example, if Sam is looking at his report, we have a section called reactions to pressure situations. If Sam really wants to have the clear understanding how he comes across when he's under pressure, he now has an opportunity to kind of stop and think, hey, maybe I'm not listening very well right now. Maybe I'm acting too quickly, spontaneously, and maybe I'm not really getting other people's input right now. That's a cue for Sam to stop and think, is this the path I want to continue? Mm-hmm. Or do I need to slow down here for a moment and really think about how I actually could modify my behavior to improve my success?
Okay. So use this section in your report to understand more about how someone with your DISC style may tend to show up under pressure.
Yeah, more self-aware you become, you begin to understand how you behave in certain situations, including under pressure, or how you tend to make decisions when those decisions, for example, are very unexpected. You need to make a quick decision and you didn't anticipate needing to make a decision. If you have awareness how you tend to act in those situations, then you can stop and think about, how do I need to modify my behavior? Having that awareness is always the key to make those right adjustments.
So it allows you to be more proactive.
Exactly.
You also mentioned the two effect, what happens when we overuse our strengths. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, like I mentioned, our strengths really often become our greatest liabilities. And the two effect, there's a couple of ways. One we already talked about is adding the word to any attributes or adjectives that describe our behavioral style. But you can also start looking at your strengths in different ways. There's lots of information in the reports looking about your sales strengths or leadership strengths. But I'm going to use one example here. There's one section labeled strengths, so it's easy to find. So when you look at some of your strengths, and I'm highlighting just a couple here for Sam, like can take risks. Well, I mean, probably the risk taking that Sam has as a natural tendency is one of the reasons he's successful today. Mm-hmm. However, when you overuse that behavior, you're going to become too much of yourself. That behavioral style, that tendency can really be detrimental to success. You can be taking too many risks, and there can be obviously terrible consequences. There's a lot of examples of businesses and entire industries that have gone down the tubes because too high risk taking.
So basically, look at your strengths, appreciate those behaviors that come very naturally and comfortably to you, but then take a different approach to looking at your strengths.
Yeah, basically now you need to make sure that you don't get too comfortable in your comfort zone, because that's the autopiloting that comes into effect.
Yeah.
And when we are kind of autopiloting, we begin to use our style more and more, and especially if there are other people who are similar to our style. If two I styles together, it's going to be a party. You're going to really emphasize that behavior even more.
Yeah.
And for both of those individuals, it becomes even more challenging to modify the behavior because other person is kind of like, don't change. We're having fun together.
It's encouraging, yes.
Right.
Okay, well, even when we've achieved success, what can we as different styles do you have any tips to modify behaviors that kind of help us keep improving?
Well, let me give you a few for each of the DISC styles that I hope that gives audience members something to think about and maybe share with others. And let's start with the D styles. Now, let's think about D styles first. What makes them successful? A lot of the D behavioral traits, like we talked about, being competitive, fast-paced, etc. But when we begin to use that behavior too much, when we're stuck in our comfort zone, that's when the trouble really begins. So here are a couple of things you can actually do as a D style to help you get out of a comfort zone. First is, there are times that you probably need to slow down. I usually tell just count to 10, but I realize with these styles, okay, they can't count to that many. So stop, slow down, count to 3, and kind of think about what you should be doing, because sometimes that fast pace is so intoxicating. You just want to keep moving, and others really can't keep up with you. And if you want to achieve your overall results, your goals as a D styles, I often focus on those. Sometimes by slowing down, you can actually speed up overall.
Get to your results faster.
That's right, because others have a chance to catch up, and slowing down. Like sometimes I used to do some racing a long time ago, and said sometimes you have to slow down to go faster.
So D's, you sports cars out there, stop going 0 to 60 all the time.
That's right. And now another one. This is related. More patience. Tough one for D styles.
It's a concept where D's have to wrap their head around.
And as you know, Christine, D styles, for no matter what part of the world you are, D style segment, that percentage of the population, always the smallest. Like in the United States, it's like 12% right now. Canada, I think, is 10%, and so on. So let's say you are in the US, almost 90% of the population is not like you. So you need to have a little bit more patience with others. And that will help you success, whether you are as a leader or a salesperson, a colleague, a team member. So learn to be a little bit more patient. And the last one, this is probably the most difficult for my D-style friends, humility, especially for successful Ds. Because successful D-styles, D-style, their theme song is, I did it my way. So when they think about being successful, they often really believe that, and many times it's justifiable, is that I'm successful because who I am, and somehow I may be even a little bit better than others. So this word humility is a D style. You may have to look it up in a dictionary.
Exactly.
But it can actually help you to become more successful. Continue to get out of your comfort zone.
Okay. Achieve results. You can do these things, D-style language, to achieve results.
Yeah, you just keep on, big picture. Again, what I'm trying to do is become more successful. Here are a couple of things that might help you. Now, context is everything. I'm not saying that you have to do all of these, but think about these 3 things, and maybe they could help you a little bit make those adjustments and improve your success.
Right. Not all the time, just maybe in specific situations and context again.
That's right. Let's move on to I styles.
Okay.
Now, what we love about I styles is they're so talkative, enthusiastic, and optimistic, and wonderful strengths. We certainly appreciate those. But there are a couple of things that we may have to do as an I style to get out of our comfort zone that will help our success. One is listening a little bit more. If you're an I style, you love to talk. You want to tell your stories and make people laugh, and everybody does appreciate that. But listening more can be something that, even that it takes effort, can also improve your success. If you're an I style, you may have a tendency when you are listening to others, you're actually thinking about what you're going to say next. And the other person is talking about telling a story. You kind of hone in some keywords and have a story about that. I have a story about that, and so on. So maybe focusing on active listening a little bit more. Another thing is that comes up I styles that often holds them back is that they get so optimistic. They are optimistic, but they get very enthusiastic about many different things. So sometimes their follow through is not quite as strong as it could be. So you need to learn a little bit of discipline, that you don't get distracted by new exciting projects and new exciting things. Squirrel. So
my dog, squirrel.
Yeah, exactly. So having a little bit more discipline on making sure that sometimes you also learn to say no, and have realistic assessment about how much work, how much time different tasks and projects will actually take, so you can execute them, and also that way you're going to learn to actually, you will get the respect of others, because they say this person really comes through, and they always have the discipline to make sure things get done. So for S styles, continuing, what S styles, what we love about them is that they are so supportive and helpful, and they want to make sure everybody's okay, and they really, of course, want sincere appreciation for that. But sometimes for S styles, that behavioral tendency, when they overdo it, they get too focused on others. And I think they really need to get a little bit more self-assurance, more confidence, and follow that Nike slogan, just do it. Not always putting the needs of other people ahead of their own. Learn to make sure that you take care of your own needs as well, and having the confidence of doing so. It's kind of funny because we're talking about getting out of comfort zone and sometimes lacking the confidence of making that adjustment is actually holding an S style back. So having that more confidence and being a little bit more decisive. And I'm not saying that S styles cannot make decisions, but they really focus on making sure that their decisions, what kind of an impact their decisions have on others. And it's impossible to make everybody happy. So you need to have that confidence of making decisions. And by the way, for my S-style friends, when you do that, others respect that, because if you can make decisions, sometimes they get a little frustrated with you. And just making that decision quickly, realizing that not everybody's always going to be happy with that, accepting that fact. I know it takes a little bit of effort and energy getting out of that comfort zone, but that will improve your success. And kind of think in terms of being healthily selfish, not always thinking about others first. It is okay to focus on your own goals, get permission to focus on your own needs. That will help you a lot. And actually, once you start doing it, it feels pretty good. And finally, for C styles, we know we are very focused on quality, not making mistakes. And we certainly love that about C styles. But one of the things is that they can actually probably learn is to be a little bit less critical. While they are good at finding mistakes, and we do need to make sure that mistakes are taken care of, their behavior can be seen as a little bit nitpicky by others. But more importantly, they're very critical of themselves. So give yourself permission to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes.
Part of the process.
Now, because if you're a C style, you're not going to make many mistakes. But when they happen, be a little bit less critical of yourself. Because if we think about when we are doing almost anything, sometimes good enough is perfectly good. If you're trying to aim for perfection, sometimes it takes too long, and sometimes it's too challenging for you and everybody else. Sometimes we just need to let go. And by letting go, not only trying to aim for perfection, but when those mistakes do happen, just take a deep breath, let it go. It's in the past. You can't change it. C styles sometimes have a tendency to really dwell on their mistakes and being so hard on themselves. Just trying to get out of that behavioral habit, getting out of that comfort zone of being focused on perfection and making sure everything's done just perfectly. Let go, and that will help you a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, Markku. I think my takeaway, just kind of a summary, is just be aware of what our natural style is. Being successful doesn't mean that we can't change. It truly does. In order to change, we have to get out of our comfort zones, those things that we prefer to do, and be able to adapt in different situations. So that awareness and the tips that Markku gave us, those are tips that don't come necessarily easily or consciously to someone with our style. But if we make those types of adjustments, we will see results. Does that sound right to you?
It sounds right. And we're talking about here a couple of things. We're talking about modifying behavior in order to be more successful. And I guess the topic really is that if we become successful, maybe we lose the motivation and the willingness and interest in making those changes. But success is not a destination. It is a continuous journey. And if you want to continue to succeed, you really don't have a choice. You need to continue to make behavioral modifications. And like we mentioned earlier, with practice, it becomes easier. But you still need to have that conscious awareness of who you are, how you tend to behave, and really pay attention to what you are doing, identifying the styles of other people, and thinking about how should I modify my behavior at this moment, because that's the only thing I can control.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you said that we can learn from successful people is they have adapted that modification into their what they do. So it becomes that learned behavior, like you said. It's a natural adjustment every time.
That's right.
So thank you, Markku.
Thanks, Christina.
He keeps putting this picture of us up, which is nice because it's like 10 years old or years ago, so we look good. I just want to say we do have another webinar coming up. It will be on Wednesday, December 14th. Again, it's a 30-minute from 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. And Markku and I will be talking about how to better understand DISC profiles. So please join us then. We'll be sending out information. We'll record this and send out the link again for you. So I want to wish all of you a happy holidays if we don't talk to you or be in contact. And I want to thank you to my boss, Marku, and we'll catch him the next time he's back in the office.
You're welcome, and thank you, everyone.
All right. Take care.